Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reed Wilson. I'm the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Welcome to our beautiful auditorium. And is this not an amazing podium right here? Yeah. It's brand new. North Carolina wood, North Carolina craftsman. I think this is only my second time with it. It's wonderful. Anyway. A few words about our department for those of you who are not familiar. As I like to say, we take care of things people love about our state, our rich history, diverse arts and culture, many spectacular natural areas. And we've got everything from art museums to the zoo, and aquariums and parks and science museums and history museums and historic sites and the library and the Arts Council and the Symphony and the African American Heritage Commission and the American Indian Heritage Commission, historic preservation, archaeology, underwater archaeology, land conservation programs, natural heritage program, land and water fund. I feel like I'm leaving someone out, but there's so many of them, you can understand my challenge here. But I think what's important about all of those places and the ideas all of them represent is that they bring us together as North Carolinians. They create a shared sense of identity. They provide common ground. Common ground, whether it's hiking in a park or two people standing looking at a piece of art in an art museum. We're all there, common ground, and in this year of 2023, anytime we can identify common ground, that is progress. Everybody's welcome at our sites, and in fact, it seems like everybody's welcome because last year we had nearly 30 million visitors to our various sites. We have about 100 sites. Hey, welcome. Come on in, make yourselves comfortable. So 30 million visitors, almost. And then more than twice as many online folks, 61 million clicks. And I did the math, and 61 million clicks works out to almost 170,000 per day. So that is a lot of people engaging with our department, which we're happy about, and we hope to keep driving up those numbers. I am excited that April is National Poetry Month. I wish I was a poet, but I don't have those sorts of talents. But it is a really important aspect of our language, of our literature, of how we communicate with one another. And who better, really, to help us celebrate National Poetry Month than our state's Poet Laureate, Jaki Shelton Green. So thrilled that you are here with us today, and want to just thank you for all you do to educate people about poetry and share your poetry and that of others around the state. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate all that you do as Poet Laureate. I also want to thank the Arts Council and the State Library for organizing and sponsoring this event. We appreciate that. To introduce Jaki Shelton Green, I want to introduce to you Dr. Tamara Brothers, who, among many other things, is the Deputy Director of the State Arts Council. So please welcome Dr. Brothers, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Secretary Wilson. Good afternoon, everyone. Don't sound too excited. Good afternoon. Thank you. As Secretary Wilson mentioned, I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce such a wonderful person and a mentor and such a wonderful person of wisdom to you today. I'll give a brief overview of the program, and then I'll read to you her wonderful bio because I want to ensure that I get all of her accolades to you. The North Carolina Poet Laureate advocates for the power of poetry and the written word to illuminate, educate, entertain, and transform the minds and hearts of people of all ages and from all walks of life. The Poet Laureate is a premier fellowship of the North Carolina Arts Council in collaboration with the Governor's Office. Jaki Shelton Green, the 9th Poet Laureate of North Carolina, appointed in 2018, is the first African American and third woman to be appointed as the North Carolina Poet Laureate and reappointed in 2021 for a second term by Governor Cooper. so there's something special about her writing. She is a 2019 Academy of American Poet Laureate Fellow, 2014 North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame inductee, 2009 North Carolina Piedmont Laureate appointment, 2003 recipient of the North Carolina Award for Literature. Jaki Shelton Green also teaches documentary poetry at the Duke University Center for Documentary Studies and is the 2021 Frank B. Haynes Writer in Residence at UNC Chapel Hill. Additionally, she received the George School Outstanding Alumni Award in 2021. Her publications include Dead on Arrival, Masks, Dead on Arrival and New Poems, Conjure Blues, Sing a Tree into Dance, Breath of the Song, published by Blair Publishers, Feeding the Light, I Want to Undie You, published by Jacquard Press, I Want to Undie You in both English and Italian bilingual edition, published by Legbeck Publishers. Juneteenth 2020, she released her first LP poetry album, The River Speaks of Thirst, produced by Soul City Sounds and Clearly Records, and released the CD, I Want to Undie You, in 2021. Ms. Green is also the owner of Sister Write, providing writing retreats for women writers in Arizona, Martha's Vineyard, Ocracoke, North Carolina, Northern Morocco, as well as in Ireland. In 2021, the Arts Club of Chicago premiered a commissioned body of work in a collaboration with Flutronics for the Black Is series and performed in April of 2022 by Flutronics and the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. She serves as the poetry editor for Walter Magazine and an appointment as the Poet Laureate in Residence at the North Carolina Museum of Art. Additionally, she has been recognized by the Forbes magazine 50 over 50 lifestyle list for 2022. As you can see, Jaki isn't just a great talent here in our state of North Carolina, she is truly an international treasure. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Jaki Shelton Green.
I have a stool. You all have no idea what this means. It means that you can actually see me. So I'm grateful for the stool maker. But I'm also very grateful to the North Carolina Library staff for this wonderful invitation, and especially grateful always to Dr. Brothers and for Secretary Wilson for your continued support. Thank you. Thank you all. The first National Library Week was observed in 1958 with the theme, Wake Up and Read. The 23 celebration marks the 65th anniversary of the first event. I am honored to participate in this celebration during National Poetry Month that highlights the valuable role of libraries, librarians, and library staff who play a role in transforming lives and strengthening our communities. We all know that libraries are full of stories in a variety of forms and formats, from picture books to large print, audiobooks to e-books, and more. But there's so much more to the story, just as there is so much more to all of our stories. Libraries help us think about what it means to be a social and accessible humanity in a time when we are far from being connected. Our stories offer us a way back to our shared humanity. A famous writer once said that stories are where we find the flashes of truth that make us free. I am always honored to participate in the rich, diverse programming of libraries across our state that brings communities together for entertainment, education, and connection through book clubs, story nights, story times, movie nights, arts and humanities series, craft nights, and community-initiated programs. I've witnessed in my own small community, library, how the library infrastructure continues to advance communities, providing internet and technology access, literacy skills, and support for businesses, job seekers, and entrepreneurs. When I think about the North Carolina State Library, I am always in awe that it was established in 1812 and continues a legacy of providing lifelong learning and access to information resources that help North Carolinians know, own, and share our rich historical narratives. The North Carolina State Library has helped me to get a glimpse of many stories about who we are, who we were, and who we have the potential to become as literary citizens. I'm also referring to the online genealogical resources that have helped me to research my family histories, in addition to the layered glimpses of a greater North Carolina history that also includes my family history. My family ensured that my love of books would begin pre-elementary school because there was no kindergarten back then. So, young folk, I didn't go to kindergarten because there was no kindergarten, okay? My love of libraries began when I was in second or third grade, educated in a rural, segregated Orange County elementary school where mostly every social venue around me was segregated. One summer afternoon, sitting in my aunt's car in the parking lot with my grandmother, while my mom, aunt, and little brother shopped in the old colonial grocery store in Mebane, North Carolina, my grandmother asked me if I wanted a library card. I wasn't sure what that meant until she explained that a library card allowed me to check out many different books to read. I knew the bookmobile well. It was like the ice cream truck for me in my neighborhood. I enjoyed tremendously and was eager to use the bookmobile all summer. I wasn't sure about actually going into the big columned library that sat just one building away from where we sat in the grocery store parking lot, on the other side of Warren's drugstore. But we did. We walked right through the front door that I'd never seen any other Black people walk into. There were tables of white children everywhere reading books. The librarian was a friendly white woman who promptly handed my grandmother the card to complete with my name and address after my grandmother told her that we were there to get a library card for me. That was the beginning of many Saturday trips to the library, where I discovered atoms, universes, and the vast apps that were as majestic as the pictures I remembered from my storybooks once I experienced them in person. Losing myself inside of the magical kingdom of books, inside my family's homes, and books I checked out with my first library card. And I later referred to my library card as my license. Not a license that allowed me to put my feet to metal and drive, but the drive and the wonderment of knowledge that my library card opened up as a license to dream wider, deeper, and higher. In some ways, I stand here today as evidence that there is more to the story, which is the theme for this year's National Library Week. I stand before you as a Southern brown girl, rising out of rich red clay, wisteria, honeysuckle, and all the hush your mouth and bless your heart of Southern skies that traced my name across Carolina skies. I saw myself everywhere and dreamed myself awake into stories. I am every child who ever dreamed. My love of language, voices, conversations, and stories was enriched by all the stories that I found myself inside of over and over again. The American novelist John Didion once wrote, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." In many ways, Didion was right. Stories may not seem like a basic survival need, but our brains naturally tell stories as a way to give structure and meaning to our lives. According to research in narrative psychology, which is an emerging field of study that examines how stories shape our lives and personalities, the stories we tell ourselves play a large role in who we are. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio explains that consciousness begins when brain gains the power, the simple power, I might add, of telling a story. I know that the stories we tell ourselves about our lives don't just shape our personalities, they are our personalities. My consciousness of ancestral stories passed down to me have informed me to think about writing as an act of witness, to think about witness as a generative act. Every day I ask myself, how does how I witness make the world better? How close can I witness? And how do we listen each other into moving closer to the stories that connect and shape our collective humanity? All of my poetry is located inside of a larger story. I envision new books that I will write as little stories that haven't happened yet. For over 40 years, I have been a strong literacy, cultural, and arts advocate and activist. I have worked with marginalized writers living in homeless shelters, incarcerated men and women, death row inmates, the newly literate, and disenfranchised women and teens. I have been blessed to witness firsthand how creativity heals. I believe that creativity is medicine, and that we all have a wellspring of creativity inside of us. In my role as North Carolina Poet Laureate, it is an honor to guide others to facilitate their creative processes. It is an honor to serve as the ambassador of the literary arts, encouraging citizens and public audiences to expand and enrich their love of literature, in addition to sharing their unique stories that help erase many of the boundaries that separate us. Which brings me to sharing with you this important thing. That last year, high school students, you are high school students, right? Okay. That I launched an initiative, a pretty far out initiative. I launched an initiative to have a youth poet laureate in every high school in all of the 100 North Carolina counties. It's pretty far out because I don't know if I have that many lives to live to get it done, but I'm ambitious about it. Last year, I'm happy to report that we appointed 14 laureates in Columbus County, and this month we appointed 3 teen laureates in Orange County and a district teen laureate for Orange County. There are many counties calling and reaching out, which is tremendously exciting. I am working with other poets, city poet laureates, to maximize this effort. I am committed to working diligently, even beyond my tenure as North Carolina Poet Laureate, to assist school districts, but I need all of you. I need everyone in this room to get the word out and help me to encourage school administrators to contact me. And I appreciate any assistance and support for that. My writing craft has served me well for many years, teaching me that I learn what I teach, teaching me that truth-telling is dangerous, and helping me to understand what James Baldwin meant when he said, the artist and the writer must make art and write about the times that they live in. Today, I invite all of you to think about your first library experiences and your early introductions into the world of poetry. Hallmark cards don't count. Today, I invite you to celebrate your favorite library and your favorite poet. This afternoon, I'm happy to share poems that represent my reflections as a documentary poet. Some of these poems are the result of using research, historical archives, and primary sources, while other poems are informed by ancestral memory and personal experiences that inform my understanding of the divine power of utterance, the divine power to tell. I'd like to start with a poem from my grandmother who I all say is the reason I do it. And that's based on a story that she would tell me many, many years as a young child. Those stories that elders tell you over and over again, and you just roll your eyes and go, yeah, you told me before. But this story did not matter and was not significant until I became an adult. That story is that my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was the property of the white slave owner who owned her and her grandmother, her mother and her grandmother. My grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was specifically the property of a 3-year-old half-sister, a little white girl that she took care of on a daily basis. It was my grandmother's 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 responsibility to ensure that this child every day was clean, was clothed, that she was properly fed, but more important, that she always had a playmate. So wherever the 3-year-old wandered, there would be my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. Unbeknownst to the adults, unbeknownst to the white parents or the white children, unbeknownst to my grandmother's 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 mother and grandmother, her half-white siblings had secretly taught her how to read and write. High school students, why was that problematic? You're going to have to speak louder.
People who were placed into slavery were not supposed to be literate, and not supposed to have any access to books or learning.
Exactly. Thank you. It was unlawful. It was against the law for any enslaved man, woman, or child to know how to read and write. Remember that, first of all, remember a lot of grandmas, so don't get confused. But remember that wherever the 3-year-old was, there you would find my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. On a particular day, my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was in a room where the white mother, who was very adamant that her white children have a proper education, she was teaching the daily lesson. My grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was there. One of her children was called on and had forgotten the answer. All the children stared at my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. One, because she was the oldest, she was 9, but also because they knew she knew. But because they were children, none of them understood the weight, how dangerous it was when she blurted out the correct answer. On that day, my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was beaten severely, was thrown out of the plantation home, bedroom that she shared with the 3-year-old, and she was sent to live at the edge of the plantation with an elderly woman who had outlived her service. The white woman had always wanted to sell my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, but her husband would never allow it. But now her big opportunity has come true. My grandmother's grandmother's grandmother is sold. On the morning that the plantation owner from a few counties away has come to fetch his new property and drive her away on the back of a wooden buck wagon pulled by horses, my grandmother's 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 mother is running behind that buck wagon, screaming and crying. If you can imagine a dusty dirt road, screaming and crying that they not take her child away. And while she is running, a rusty nail falls from the bottom of the wooden wagon. My grandmother's 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 mother picks up the nail and puts it in her pocket, and she keeps it. I believe that what we keep keeps us. Years later, my grandmother's 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 mother is able to buy her child out of slavery. So the child returns to our family. That nail has been passed down on the matrilineal side of our family. I received that nail when I was 25, which was a long time ago. I am the keeper of the nail. But it is this story my grandmother told me over and over again. I tell you this story because someone who looked just like you nearly lost her life to read and write. I wanted to be an oceanographer. though I'd never seen the ocean and I did not know where the ocean lived. But Jacques Cousteau had convinced me that I should be an oceanographer. But it was my grandmother who said, "You must tell this story. That is your job, little one. Daughter, tell the story. Tell many stories." So the power of utterance. I'm going to read this poem that I wrote when I was doing a residency with women on death row here in Raleigh. So I was not on death row. I was doing a writing residency. So the last time I said that it appeared in the paper, we never knew Miss Shelton Green had served on death row. So now I need to give you a little more information. So I was there as a writer in residence working with imprisoned writers. And because I do consider myself the teacher who learns what she teaches, I also wrote many poems. The only subject matter the women were allowed to work with for an entire year were their hands. I wanted them to think about the power of their hands. I wanted them to think about what their hands were holding. And I wanted them to think about, since they were on death row, forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and what grace, the power of grace. I know the grandmother one had hands. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in bowls, folding, pinching, rolling the dough, making the bread. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always underwater, sifting rice, bluing clothes, starching lives. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in the earth, planting seeds, removing weeds, growing knives, burying sons. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always under the cloth, pushing it along, helping it birth into skirt, dress, curtains to lock out night. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the hair, parting, plaiting, twisting it into rainbows. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside pockets, holding the knots, counting the twisted veins, holding on to herself, lest her hands disappear into sky. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the clouds, poking holes for the rain to fall. So I'm going to read another poem for my grandmother. Praise song. You, woman tree, woman one, swaying to unheard of winds, uninvented airstreams. You, woman sky, with palms broad enough to hold Egypt, who taught me to walk slow and deliberate like I had somewhere to go, who taught me stories that needed telling, to love men and women who need it, who taught me to fetch life out of the depths of rivers, taught me the words that the tree branches sang to wake the sun and bring morning home, who taught me to love loving with my eyes wide open, who taught me to dance and smile in rhythm, to clap with an open heart. I'm going to move to some pieces that I have used a lot of historical context for. How many people know who Elizabeth Keckley was? 2 folks, 3. Elizabeth Keckley was Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln's dressmaker or modiste. Elizabeth Keckley came to Orange County, to Hillsborough, North Carolina, by way, and I always get it confused, I think Presbyterian, but it might have been Episcopal. She came with a preacher. She came by way with this man and his family. She was given as a wedding gift to his wife by her sister. Elizabeth Keckley went to work at the Burwell School in Hillsborough, private school for white women. Elizabeth Keckley did not take well to slavery, to being enslaved. She was considered insolent, uppity. But the family was so poor they needed to hire her out. Several years ago, Hillsborough, North Carolina decided to, first of all, they were calling it a celebration of Elizabeth Keckley in Orange County, and I challenged them and said, "You're celebrating her getting her behind beat every day? You're celebrating her enslavement? Let's call it a commemoration of her presence in Orange County," which they did. I was requested, along with a writer friend of mine, to construct a collection of poetry, sort of a call and response in the voices of Mary Todd Lincoln and Elizabeth Keckley. So my friend wrote a series of poems in Mary Todd Lincoln's voice, and I wrote poems in Elizabeth Keckley's voice. So I'm going to read 2 poems. I'm going to read one piece from that program collection, and the other piece I'm going to read a poem that I was commissioned to write for the Elizabeth Keckley Reader, Volume 1. What daily things? Oh, Mary, dear noble woman, I've seen devils unleashed. When I was about 7 years old, I witnessed for the first time the sale of a human being. We were living at Prince Edward in Virginia, and Master had just purchased his hogs for the winter, for which he was unable to pay in full. To escape from his embarrassment, it was necessary to sell one of his slaves. Little Joe, the son of the cook, was selected as the victim. His mother was ordered to dress him up in his Sunday clothes and send him to the house. He came in with a bright face, was placed in the scales, and was sold, like the hogs, at so much per pound. His mother was kept in ignorance of the transaction, but her suspicions were aroused. His mother was kept in ignorance for a long time. When her son started for Petersburg in the wagon, the truth began to draw upon her mind, and she pleaded piteously that her boy should not be taken from her. But Master quieted her, telling her that he was simply going to town with the wagon and would be back in the morning. Morning came, but little Joe did not return to his mother. Morning after morning passed, and the mother went down to the grave without ever seeing her child again. One day she was whipped for grieving for her lost boy. Colonel Burwell never liked to see one of his slaves wear a sorrowful face, and those who offended in this particular way were always punished. Oh, Mary, dear noble mothers, I've seen such polite devils. Your dusty little heads are all accounted for. No need to count their shadows at play. Only God would find them irresistible enough to eat. Saintly wolf. Sunday clothes are meant for Sunday things. Prayers and hymnals dance above the heads of your young cubs. A ride to town in the wagon means a warm bed hours later. A ride to town in the wagon means sweet dreams of licorice and clove-studded oranges. A ride to town is just a ride to town, protected, adored. Oh, Mary, dear noble sister, I've known mothers like you, dark, straight, fierce, with Mama Storm like you, but not enough storm for the devils that steal her babies, not enough storm to chase away poisonous white man fever, not enough storm to locate and bury their tiny bones, not enough storm for the whip that counts her tears. So this next piece is from this collection of pieces of historical and poetic narratives around Elizabeth Keckley. The poem itself refers to her trade as a seamstress. She was discovered by women in Washington, D.C. She had a reputation during that period as one of the finest seamstresses on the East Coast. And these women of nobility, these presidents' wives and senators' wives in Washington, sought her out, and she eventually moved to Washington, D.C., where she and Elizabeth Keckley became BFFs, best friends forever. But they were unequal. And if you're interested, it's a very interested relationship that they have. Very, very interesting. Elizabeth Keckley became a very prominent woman in Washington, D.C., actually very wealthy inside of the freed African-American milieu of upper middle class blacks in Washington, D.C. She's one of the founders of Wilberforce University in Ohio. A Feast of Whispers. Elizabeth Keckley was nobody's backwoods whisper. She knew that even the clothespins, sparrow feathers, blue glass, all whispered in the night, like the spider unlacing a full moon web. She gathered the very bloodline of cotton, damask, silk, linen. She worked inside of the stillness of the night, knowing that this stillness was deeper than death waiting, she becoming more of the notion of free. Each stitch, prick, between torch flight and night's light, knew how to measure a sky of neck, hips, wrist, thighs. Each stitch taught her how to tell rock from bone. Each stitch, whispering, bone hangs close to the needle. Rock pushes, slices, colors pattern, like the soles of her feet outracing the notion of freedom. The unrecognizable sound of her own voice, crying for the loss of her son's skin, weaves into the dancing sleeve of a white woman on the brink of becoming more of the notion of free, like birds who fight the shadows of their own wings. Soft dawn whispers crown a morning that pushes back the blush of shimmering thread against the paleness of a dancing southern mistress, stupefied elegance, stretched across drowned indigo stamped chemise, soaked in a music that erases the gentility of surrender. Mary Todd Lincoln prayed for rain clouds inside a blood-stained horizon that would not bend. Her only salvation in the hands of her modiste, Lizzie, slave, bonded as confidant. Her words carrying empty potions, unrecognizable as the taste of her own bondage. The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. Lizzie offered a prayer for the prayers unanswered, for the torched, scorched, torn, damned soul of her captor. Her womb soothed 1,000 lashes that wounded the sky, the grass, the river, the fire of her breath. As the story unfolds beneath her cloth, she holds the few strands of what remains of another story, hushed, folded, unwritten, like the path from arrival to departure, from him to Bodis. She sews glass buttons in between the hours that grow inside the desert of her unrecognizable heart. Two women hold back sinister nights, drink from the same cup that spills, disintegrating the only blank canvas between them. They reach for the same light. One hand burned, the other holds heat so close it frays the lace, the landscape of her whiteness. So close it becomes airborne divination. face to face, silhouette to silhouette. They feel each other's breath, but too many years have stripped them bare of any notion of the freedom they stole from each other. They are the reflection of the same offering to a hungry God, conjuring new skirts for new dancers. The prick of the thumb unleashes more than blood-stained seams, unleashes more than the shrouded dance floors of slaves and unmarked cemeteries, more than the unbearable notion of unrecognizable freedom crawling through the very eye of her needle. Mary-Todd Lincoln wears weary well, like an undressed sunrise, bulging with veins of poverty, throbbing, beckoning with the unraveling voice of fallen petals. It becomes her well. She steps out of her skin for an unmeasurable fitting of her soul. One last lift of muted organza that hugs the waist perfect. She becomes her own modiste, dressing for the dance of freedom, dressing for all the denied dances of her mother, dressing for all the denied slaves, whispering from her unrecognizable voice. And I just realized, I'm sorry, I need to read this again. Dressing for all the denied dances of her mother, dressing for all the denied slaves, whispering from her unrecognizable voice. From a rooftop, she imagined she saw him, but then she never could decipher between bone and stone. The smell of her Abe Lincoln, still lingering in the bloody fabric, pressed hard against her chest, flooding parched, untamed rivers, weighing more than her drooping breast. Each stitch taught her how to tell, taught her how to measure the heaviness of her own war. Each stitch created a forbidden game, a forbidden weapon. She learned to dress and undress the shadows of her own ladies in waiting, the shadows of quivering stardust hanging from shackled branches. Okay, thank you, thank you. I'm going to read a piece that I wrote for, it's really interesting because I sort of sometimes never know what I'm going to read until I show up. And it's actually the energy of the audience that sort of says, yeah, you should read that. But I did select this piece, thinking about my eldest daughter, Alad, who died 13 years ago at the age of 38. And this is a piece that I wrote for her when she was born. Imani. The first time your tiny lips searched for my breast, I knew that your soul had decided to stay. Grandma taught me babies were spirits, whispers, wind souls cruising through time. Sometimes they stayed, sometimes they roamed back into the womb, wanting, needing to come again, knowing their own birthing time. The first time I smelled you, I knew the earth flowers would be jealous, would feel diminished by your smell of wind, ocean, sky. Your taste was the taste of seed, clouds, and rain. Your screams were the last thunderbolts of my grandmother's woman tribe. We buried your veil beneath the sage, peppermint, and bloodroot. I knew you would stay. You first dreamed of horses with no heads who stood at your bed laughing at you, their heads somewhere else riding the night. You would talk to the moon inside your crib, choreograph Oriental operas, your tongue tasting herstory through woven quilts of grandmother's past and grandmother's here. Your cheeks sleeping on the stitches of fear, tiredness, happy stitches, strong stitches, patterned stitches of yourself, telling a life ready to happen. How are we doing for time? 2:51. Okay, so I'm going to read from two pieces. I actually have to read a third poem because I can't end on these two pieces. I don't believe in leaving certain energies into the room. The first piece I'm going to read, Oh My Brother, is a poem that I wrote as a part of a national, actually international, Poetry of Lamentation project. So this project was started by a woman in New York City, a poet who wanted families across the United States who were losing their loved ones to police brutality to know that there were other people who stood with them. So when I got the phone call and I said, yeah, I'll do that. And it was explained to me that the way things were happening, that within 24 to 48 hours, I would get my person. I would get my person. Within 24 hours, before 24 hours was up, I had my person. An email that directed me to a link to a less than 30-second news bite that said, unidentified black man killed on Route 32 by police today. More news on the 6 o'clock news. That's all I had. But when I got off the phone and was walking to another part of my house, my knees almost just crumbled because I realized that, I'm waiting for somebody to die. That the poem will be written when the person dies. And it struck me that, do I really want to, this just felt so strange in so many ways. But I did it. I did not know a name for this person, unidentified black man. But in that moment, he was every brother that I know and that I'd ever known. Oh, my brother. Oh, my brother, my brother. I will weep for you whenever the sun rises or falls. Your shadow has been betrayed. The red of the bullet bleeds and covers every breath of all the life you lived. Oh, my brother, my brother. I will stand here and wail your name, hold the bullet inside my mouth that cannot stop convulsing with pain. I will learn to swallow the spasms in your screams. I am calling my brothers and my sisters to the ground beside this river where your blood is born, where your blood runs until it is clear, until its red is spent and it stands up like the wind and speaks into a light we cannot name. Oh, my brother, my brother. I beat my chest, pierce my hands, run back and forth naked in rain, trying to swallow this red of a bullet that knew your name, cracked open your smile, stole your hair. Oh, my brother. I weep for all I do not know about you. I weep with the bullet that is lodged in my throat, whispering its own requiem. The red of the bullet cries out your name. The bullet whispers to me about the flowers that heard the sound. The bullet whispers to me about the sorcery of forgiveness. The bullet whispers to me about black flies stirring the ground beneath your feet. Oh, my brother, who will wash your feet, save the sand inside your shoes? Oh, my brother, where is your mother, your father? Who will help me scrape the dried blood that blocks the doorway of your heart? I want to be the water, the sweet oils that rub into the skin of you. I want to hold your bones steady so your mother can identify your face and rub the soft earlobes she's kissed 1,000 times. Oh, my brother, how must we hold your lover who wants a redemption for your skin, who searches for your lips in the dark? Oh, my brother, there is so much blood falling from the sky tonight, suffocating the light, suffocating the babies. I will guard your road-killed blood. If necessary, I will chew the bullet and digest metallic contradiction. I will be the shovel and the crib. I will sing your name until the wind lifts it from my tongue and sings your legacy into the 10th degree of sound. I will wail the presence of your history through this tongue and throat that is out of rhythm. We be poets, the daughters of your winters and sons of your summers. We be ancient scribes, the architects of your sweat and your tears. My poems will be forever screaming the life of you. I dare the red of the bullet to forget. I dare the killer of you to remember. My words are the acid erasing the crime scene. My words are the softness of all the evidence of ghost hidden beneath your shirt, inside your underwear. Hungry ghost, casting your name into rivers. Oh, my brother, oh, my brother. What are the ancestors singing? Oh, my brother, you don't have to behave in your grave. Oh, my brother, call me, and these lyrics will gather arms and stage your rebellion. The red of the bullet has the poetry of your spirit embedded with indelible ink. Oh, my brother, my brother. Hear the wail of the red of the bullet. Hear the space between your ribs crumble. Hear the sounds in your chest become a roaring ocean. Hear the butterflies cease flying. Hear this silence that will not be quiet. And I'm going to read another piece because I don't like leaving certain energies laying around. The river speaks of thirst. Oh, how I want to sit here and sing into your night. Lean deep inside the elbows of this river where blood is born. Sing a litany into this open book of your story, my story. This river shrugs its belly, births kindness for all things yet to be born. Oh, how I want to sit here and feast from your wet palms. This river, wounded heart, holding the locked secrets of ancestral crones, kneeling, feeding the doorways of all your drowned seasons. Oh, how I want to be born inside this river as a lone, wild burst of yellow, becoming more and more an eclipse of wind, becoming more and more an eclipse of freedom. We are all this flow. We are all this river where blood is born. Oh, how I yearn to empty the veins of my life story into this nameless, pregnant river. Like you, like me, it also struggles to remember its own birthing, its own flow. Wide, deep story, swallowing forest, birthing newness inside the whisper of this story, this hungry thunder. Oh, how I yearn to bear such freedom. Hold the stones, the bones, the skeletons of moon, sun, dust, inside mouth, womb, spirit, tomb. Conjure a dervish of primal, ancient becoming. We swallow more and more of this river where blood is born. We shapeshift into the sweet shadows of this river's dance, this river's prayer, howling when it runs backwards, remembering other names, other skins, other songs it's birthed and sung. Thank you. So I think that they have provided a process for questions, if there are any questions.
Thank you so very much. That was wonderful. If anyone has questions, we have microphones at the front here, or we do have someone in the crowd that can come to you. And if you're online watching this and you have questions, please put them in the comments for monitoring and we will ask.
Yes.
I so appreciated your comments about libraries and share those. And just want your reflections on the current move to dismantle and destroy them.
It makes me very sad. You know, sometimes there are things that happen in our country that just I don't have words for. And I don't have words, too many words for this moment in time that not only our libraries, but precious life has been deemed worthless. So I think that's why literature and reading and creativity and art is this amazing bridge where we come in all of our otherness. You know, in certain countries, there are libraries where you swap humanity, where people can check you out, where you show up on a given day and whatever your interests are, you sit in a circle and somebody's like, I want to check you out, and you go away with that person and have a conversation about whatever it is that interests you. Maybe it's carpentry, or you love to go to museums, or your thing is gardening. So I think that we the people, that we the humanity have to really be diligent and vigilant and proactive about preserving the things that make us who we are. You know, I'm always reminded about the powerful bridge that art is whenever I'm on a dance floor dancing. And you're looking across the room and there's someone like way over there and you don't know that person's name, but you both are like really into the music and you're moving and you're having a good time and you can feel this energy like, yeah, I love the music too. Nobody stops to ask the question, I wonder who the drummer voted for. So it is art. It's always art. That's this bridge where we come in all of our otherness and all of our differences. And that's why as a child, understanding the power of libraries, and it was my sacred house. It was this place that I found myself in over and over again because I was a human being. And I had the audacity to say, yeah, you can go to Switzerland and see those Alps one day. As a little brown girl living in North Carolina. So, you know, we have to continue to think about how we package these dreams for our generations yet to come. And I don't know if that really answered it, but yeah. Any other questions? Down front.
All right, so currently in AP Language and Composition, a class that I'm taking in school, we were having like discussions about online libraries and how like students now prefer online over like real libraries. So I know that we as a society are like moving towards more online and like moving away from libraries. So I just wanted to ask you about your views on that.
I appreciate all the technological advancement in our world. But libraries, I just don't want to see them disappear. You know, when there was that movement to close libraries and not have books, and I was like, yikes. You know, there's something about a dusty book, and there's something about sitting with it, and there's something about going to the library. And for many children, going to the library might be like their direct relationship to who they're going to become. You know, we never know what libraries do for us. I know what they do for us. So this notion of everything being convenient is a little scary for me. Is a little scary. So I appreciate that we have these options. Yeah, but I hope it's not an online or the physical libraries.
All right, thank you.
What do you think?
I don't know. I don't really read like physical books anymore unless I have to like buy it for class or something, but I prefer online just because like I got used to that and I can find like a wide range of books instead of like going to the library and ending up not finding the book that I wanted.
So young people, how many people, first of all, congratulations on being in Raleigh as pages. That's amazing. How many of you use the library? I mean, like, go there. Yeah. Libraries aren't like what they were when I was a little girl. Libraries are fascinating. Like, I go on college campus, I'm like, this is like a cathedral. There's so much knowledge. And I always find myself, like, I want to go into sections I've never been in before. So I'm going to encourage you, and I don't use the word challenge, I'm going to encourage you. Next time you go traveling in a big city, go to the big city libraries. Check them out, the old libraries. The knowledge inside of these libraries. One of the most fabulous exhibits I've ever seen in my life was an exhibit at the University of Austin in Austin, Texas, University of Texas in Austin, on the history of reading, not writing, but reading. And I think I went every day. I kept going back because I couldn't get enough of it. But just think about that. And there's a book called The History of Reading. And there's a book, The History of Writing. But just thinking about what we don't know. We know so much, and we know so little. So, go find that globe. It's a globe. One of the best things that ever happened to me was to be able to leave North Carolina at a very young age and to go away to a Quaker boarding school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Because, when we're in the South, we kind of get stuck. When we're anywhere where we've never been to other places, we get stuck. So go out there, find that globe, and find all the things in it that you didn't know about yourself. That's where you learn about yourself, not at home. So, thank you. Thank you for your question. Any other questions?
So, as like teenagers and youth, how do you recommend that we can work to prevent the closing of libraries and to sort of preserve books in actual libraries?
Use your voice. Write letters. Start campaigns. There are librarians across the country. I get emails every week that are trying to save banned books. They're trying to save their libraries. Research. Y'all use Google for everything else, right? Go find out where your voice is needed. And there are a lot of youth mobilizations around, preserving constitutional education. Yeah. But it's your voice. That's why I'm excited about having poet laureates in every school. So go back to your high schools, please, and talk that up for me.
Right,
Because
thank
a
you.
poet, Shelley said that poets are the legislators of the world. And I believe that. The United Nations used to open with a World Poetry Day, where all the delegates had to open with a poem. And I don't know why it stopped, but they would bring New York City children from all over, every borough, to the United Nations on World Poetry Day. And the delegates would open with poetry from their countries. So there are so many unique ways, right, where we can use our voices. And you don't, it's like that story, my daddy used to say, I don't have to eat the whole pig to know his pork. Like, how can you say things sometimes without it being in people's face as a direct accusation? But the real pro reasons why we need libraries. We focus on the negative sometimes, and we don't give all the beneficial reasons for why we should or should not do something. But thinking about how books, how libraries affect your life. Okay. Yes, thank you. Is there another question?
Like you, when I was a child, my mother always insisted that we take turns at the bookmobile. But my mother also believed that books could carry you everywhere. So when you're writing your poems, how do you see yourself? In other words, do you carry yourself? But when you were writing The River Speaks, what were you thinking about? What do you think about when you pen your poems?
So that particular poem, I was invited with a group of writers to respond to artwork of a group, so it was a ekphrastic writing exercise, artwork of artists who were painting images of the Eno River. So I actually went to the river. You know, you got to go to the river if you're going to write about the river, and to really experience the river. And so it depends on what I'm writing. I'm working on a collection. I'm working on a bunch of stuff, but I'm working on a collection of historical, a collection of poems that that are around lynching, that commemorate my great uncle's lynching. And for that, I've had to do a lot of research. And it's funny, you asked me, like, what am I doing? I'm surrounded by books. Books are like, I have to push them over to, I like literally have to push the books out of the way to sit the computer down. And I find myself picking up books. And sometimes it's something that's totally not near what I'm writing. It might be fairy tales. So it's like, what's informing me for this context? So I go down that research rabbit hole quite a bit. But yeah, it's kind of, what am I writing about and what's informing it? So I will say this, and this I hope will benefit the students, so, and anybody. How many people journal? Great, a lot of journal. So I use my journal as a bank account. You might have heard me say this before. I use my journal as a bank account. So with bank accounts, what are we doing? We're constantly depositing and withdrawing. So in 2005, I was invited to travel to Central America to be a part of an artist collective of residency. And there was nothing required of me. I didn't have to teach. It was like I could actually do work. I took 13 journals with me. And I had no idea what was in those 13 journals. But I used journals, like today, I may be motivated to go home and maybe something that you said. But it might only be 3 words, but those 3 words get deposited. It might be a sentence, it might be a paragraph. I make the deposits. So I go to Central America with 13 journals, and they're full. But some are like half pages, 2 or 3 words on 1 page. But those 13 journals started talking to each other. So I had made a lot of deposits. I went to Central America with money in the bank and came back with this manuscript. I did not know that this manuscript was inside of there, but I was hoping that there was some poetry there. So, yeah, I'm a collector of snippets, of experiences, of music, of whatever it is that's speaking to me in the moment. Anything
So if I
else?
can just piggyback on the back of that, and
Yes.
I'll let you go. For the youngsters who say they don't like the library, do you also find that you may have a recorder, or do you keep a pen and paper by your bed at night, or do you just find yourself, if you're riding in the car, you say, okay, I want to do that when I get home?
I have journals everywhere, at my house, your house. And I intentionally leave them in certain spaces so that they're always there when I return. But, you know, a brown paper bag becomes a journal. The back of a receipt becomes a journal. I had one of those little tiny those little, what do they call them, crop planes that like really scare you to death, flying from Asheville to the ocean one time. I jokingly challenged these people who wanted me to be in two places at one time, and I was like, the only way I'm gonna get there is you're gonna fly me. And they were like, we can do that. I was like, oops. So they flew me from Asheville to somewhere on the coast, and it was really scary. It was just me and the pilot. And I was so nervous, but for some reason, my mind got stuck on nicknames. And I only had like a small little clutch bag. I didn't have any paper. And I pulled out, I had gotten a piece of mail, and I opened it up. It was like junk mail. I opened the envelope all the way up. By the time I landed, I was writing as tiny as I could. I had filled that entire envelope, front and back, with all the nicknames I'd ever heard in my community growing up. That's a collection of short stories. Because every nickname, right, is a character. So source material is everywhere. It's everywhere. So I used to keep journals, and I still do, by my bedside. But what I really use is the notes feature on my phone now. And I have a new book that was comprised totally in notes. And one day my husband said, you better put that in your computer or you're going to inadvertently forget what it is and delete it. The entire book was written on notes. Because, I can just pick it up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and there I am in the dark. And I do this, my phone is really a huge depository journal of stuff ready to be edited. I still write with a pen or a pencil, and I should actually buy stock in legal pads because I love legal pads. And that's where I write, and the computer is where I do the work. The computer is where the editing happens, right? Where it goes to stay. It's permanent place. But there's something wonderful about that visceral connection between the pen in your hand and the paper. And as a child, I loved paper. I still do. I hoard paper. Love beautiful paper, and I find those handmade paper stores to buy handmade paper. So enough about me. Anything else?
So we have a question from YouTube, and this is about your teaching. Can you share what makes the medium of documentary poetry unique from other types of documentaries, and what led you to teach that course at Duke University?
So, there are a number of poets that I have been girl fanning for years, like Carolyn Forche, who is one of our foremost documentary poets in the United States. And some other folk, Natasha Trethewey, who wrote an amazing book about monuments, that's documentary poetry. Documentary poetry uses primary, secondary sources to kind of retell or repurpose a historical, personal, or current event. So, primary sources. Library cards, a primary source. Documents, driver's license, birth certificate, death certificate, immigration papers, adoption papers, the title to your car, your will. All of these are documents. And you can actually lift from historical documents or even from news text that is inside of a historical news piece that you're using. You can actually lift language into the poem. But documentary poetry has really served for poets who are writing about social change, who use documentary poetry to look at especially a lot of historical events. And I'm thinking of Reznikov, who was writing back in the 30s, who was an attorney by day, and he was a poet at night. But he used all of his legal briefs. One of his most famous poems is a poem called Negroes. And it's about a black man who was seen allegedly peeping into the window of a young white girl's bedroom. Her father went out. He ended up in jail, but he also ended up dead. So all of these briefs that he was working on became the primary source for his writing. And there are many, many, many. The Women of Troy, which is an amazing documentary, working with a documentary poet, documentary photographer who look at this particular section of Troy, New York, and how industrialization has led to a heightened impoverishment, especially of single women and children. And I could go Kwame Dawes, Mother of Mothers, who goes to Haiti and uses documentary poetry to document the plight of the mothers who are burying children during the AIDS epidemic, and also during the earthquake. So I could go on and on and on. I realized when I started teaching documentary poetry a long time ago, I didn't know that that's what my genre was. Like, you know, it's like I just love doing research and using that archival material that I would find to create new poetics. Once I started teaching it, I realized how heavily my work is centered and embedded in documentary poetry. So for many, many years, I'd worked with the Center for Documentary Studies, working with documentary photographers and filmmakers who would come there doing documentary photography and literacy. So when they decided they wanted to teach documentary, well, to have it as a part of the curriculum, they called me, and that's what I come and teach documentary poetry. So that's that story.
Are there any other questions?
You mentioned you have all of these journals and that you're hoarding. Have you ever considered as your life's legacy in donating them to the state archives?
You've got to fight with Duke.
We can go half and half.
So, yeah, so, you know, many years ago, before my daughter Imani died, she came to me one day and she says, you know, I've been thinking, what are we supposed to do with all of this stuff when you're gone? And I was like, she's like, has anybody ever asked you for your papers? And it was really funny because like within a month, Duke and UNC asked me for my papers. And this was back in the 90s. And I said, sure. And they never came back. And then last year or year before last, it became real. And the...
So there's signed documentation, you're saying?
I'm sorry?
There's signed documentation on this commitment?
No, I haven't signed on it yet.
Okay, so there's still hope.
We can be there whenever
because-
you need us
yeah.
to be there.
I've been dragging my feet on it because they're like, we will come to your house, we will clean out boxes, we will go in your attic, we will do this. And I was like, It's like I would have to like prepare for you to come to do these things. But it's the Women's Studies Department. We'll talk.
They're a consortium.
Yeah, we can be there whenever you need, and we'll do it however you want.
Y'all make me feel real
Cultivation.
important. Thank you. Yeah,
Any-
it's funny because what I love about the Women's Studies Department is they don't want just the Poet Laureate, who's the first African American. They want any woman's story. And that's so important to me because all of our stories matter. They even said, you know, we want stuff from your mama. You know, my mom just died at the age of 106 in December, and she was very alert and very alive, and her mind was very sharp, and literally until the 2 weeks that she was making her transition. Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of those, inside of that hospice piece, one day she woke up and she was like telling me about the news. And I was like, oh, she's still here. So, yeah, so I'm happy that they're interested in all women and their stories. And that's what I stand for, is the everydayness, ordinariness of the life story. The person who vacuumed these rugs this morning story is as important as mine. And we should know that story too. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it.